The Dog and Deuce Show is produced by Dymar Productions in association with Studio B Productions.
Welcome to Utah's longest-running sports podcast. This is Dog and Deuce. Utah's football season kicks off in exactly 2 weeks. Bryan Brown from Locked On Utes joins us to break down what we can expect from this year's team. We've got all that and a whole lot more coming your way on Dog and Deuce number 378.
From Studio B in Salt Lake City, this is Dog and Deuce. Join the conversation at doganddeuce.com or send an email to doganddeuce@gmail.com.
Thank you for listening to the Dog and Deuce Show, episode number 378. If you want to know more, and I sure hope you do, follow along with the show notes at doganddeuce.com.
You can watch the show on your television set all weekend long on K-Patter TV, or if you're in southern Utah, you can watch it on Backcountry TV. As always, you can listen wherever you get your favorite podcasts. We would love to hear from you. Send us an email, won't you? Our email address is doganddeuce@gmail.com. I'm Dog.
And I'm Deuce.
And this is episode 378. We got 2 weeks till kickoff. 2 weeks.
Whoop, 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 whoop.
I got to say, I'm a little bummed. Here's my mission for this season. I want to get our boy Brian Priest from the Home Court Press podcast. I want to get him pumped for college football. Because he mentioned on Twitter that he just doesn't share our excitement level that we're feeling right now. So that's my goal. And of course, Brian is part of the Home Court Press podcast, part of the Jazz Pod co-op, which we are a proud member of. So, but that's my goal for the season. We're going to get Brian amped for college football so that next season, as time and the clock is ticking, he's going to get excited.
That sounds like a solo mission for you. It doesn't seem like it's doable. I mean, I am the constant person who takes on a task of the impossible, and I'm trying to limit myself in that. But we'll give it a shot.
We have to at least try. Try.
I'm going to ride your coattails on that one. But I hope we can.
I hope we can too. Bryan Brown from Locked On Utes, from Ute Zone, from the Blockcast podcast, and a million other things. You've heard him on the radio. You've seen his writings. You've seen him on Twitter, Brown Bear SLC. He joins us. And man, this dude, like, we always talk about how Phil Steele comes in here and just drops knowledge. Well, I think he rivaled Phil Steele on this one because he didn't have any notes in front of him. And we would just ask him kind of, not random questions, but questions that we're not, we didn't prep him for it. We didn't send him the questions beforehand. And the dude knows in depth this Utah team probably more than anybody in the market, I think.
Yeah, I mean, he comes on, he drops knowledge with flair, looking good doing it. I mean, how much more can you ask for? That's the question. Zero. You can't ask for more.
One thing I didn't mention to him that I wish I would have, he's wearing the Salt Lake Stallion shirt.
I know. I was thinking about it.
I've been thinking about that team, man, and what could have been. That would have been so much fun if that league could have just held on. So much fun. Anyway, Bryan Brown, let's just jump into it. Bryan Brown, right here on Dog and Deuce. Well, we are still transitioning out of our basketball talk, which we've been doing for, God, man, months and months and months with the Utah Jazz. But it is my favorite time of year. It's college football, and there's no one better to preview the Utes than the man himself, Bryan Brown from Ute Zone, from Locked On Utes. He's also on pretty much every single local podcast that's ever mentioned the Utes, I think. Bryan, is that about right?
It has to be at this point because there's not a lot of them. And I think it's just maybe that I'm that big of a loser. I have that much free time on my hands. But, I just try to I love talking Utes, and I love the fan base. Try to interact as much as possible. I'm sorry if you're sick of hearing my voice out there somewhere. Somebody is, but one last podcast won't kill anybody, I'm sure.
No, dude, I actually look at it totally different. So I think you break down the Utes better than even most of the local media personalities. Like, you seem to really know this team. And so that's why when we're doing our preview this year, we had to have you on because there's just no one better to break it down. So we appreciate you joining us and previewing this season.
No, I was excited to hop on. I've been a longtime listener to the podcast. I mean, years now that I've been tuning in and listening to what you've done. And really impressed by what you guys have built. And someday my production levels might be somewhere near what you're doing, but I'm not betting on anything anytime soon, as I'm out here in the middle of a courtyard broadcasting. So it kind of gives you an idea of where my life is at these days.
Well, dude, as you know, like you gotta record when you can. You know, you just have to. You got to make time for it. And I was actually thinking about this last night. As long as we've been doing this, as long as you've been doing this, and as prolific as your podcasting career has been, it's kind of crazy. This is the first time we've ever done this together.
It is, and I think that's one of those things that really, when you look at what happened last year and how everything unfolded, I think that's what's really changed the game as far as the season, as far as podcasting goes, as far as interactions, is that we lost so much last year and there was so much kind of up in the air that I think everybody hit pause. And so this year, I think you're seeing a real resurgence in excitement and energy just to have a season, just to feel a little bit normal. And I know that you were talking last week a little bit about, will fans get back in the stands? How's that going to look? How's that going to go? And everything like that. And I think, at the end of the day, that's what everybody really wants, is to get back to feeling that normalcy of it all. And it's good to finally get on with both of you and talk some Utes and whatever else comes up. I think that's what I love most about your podcast, is that there's not, any one subject that you're focused on. I know I talk a lot of Utes. There's no doubt about that. But I love how you guys are not afraid to cover any other topic, and that everything is just, free flowing. It's a lot of fun that way. And, I've done little side projects like that, but the Utes without a doubt are my main bag.
I think James would kill me if I was like, no, we're only going to talk Jazz. We're only going to talk Utes, because long ago, and this is a little inside baseball, but long ago when we were kind of planning this out, like 11 years ago, James was like, dude, we can't just do one topic. It'll drive me crazy. Is that right, man? Isn't that about what you told me?
Yeah, I mean, I'm impressed when people can be so into it, but I probably have undiagnosed ADHD. I need multiple avenues. But today we talk football because it's coming, it's here, it's almost ready. We got Bryan ready to give us the goods. Let's do it. I'm excited. Like 2 weeks away, essentially, right here, right?
Is it 2 weeks? I don't even know. I just know it's a Thursday night. I got to be there.
Yeah, I think we have actually less than 2 weeks now. I think it's is it a week? No, 2 weeks. You're right, James. 2 weeks. So time is flying by. How has camp been going so far? They don't allow people, they don't allow media to get in and actually watch the practices anymore, do they?
They do not. And it's, I don't think you'll find a single media member that's happy about that. Relying on this particular coaching staff for quotes and information is kind of like relying on 7-Eleven to produce a gourmet meal. You're going to lose your expectations right from the jump. And so they do feed us some information here and there. We're lucky with my ties with Ute Zone and 24/7 Sports to have a little bit more in-depth conversations because of the recruiting angle that we cover. But I think camp is going as well as anybody could have expected, unless you were the guy that has to make the decision on who's going to be the starting quarterback, in which case Cameron Rising has really just thrown a wrench in all the plans. The most consistent fact, I don't think there was anybody out there that didn't believe that Cameron Rising was a good quarterback. What I think everybody thought was that he would not recover as quickly from a very serious shoulder injury and be this good this quickly into the season. I think there were maybe some concerns that it wouldn't be a few weeks until the season actually started that he would be ready. And he's just been so diligent in his rehab, been so diligent in his preparation that he's really thrown a wrench into it. And so now we're into week 2 and possibly even week 3 of who's going to be the starting quarterback at the University of Utah. That being said, I think they're very pleased with how the team's progressing. I think it's a very focused group. I think there's a lot of good returning leadership there. Camp is always a little bit easier in the sense that the biggest issues that you're having are always within the team, right? Like there's nobody from the outside trying to poke the bear, so to speak, in terms of, games played or games lost or anything like that. And so for a group that is a little bit heavier in experience and leadership, it's been a successful camp without a doubt.
And James, feel free to jump in at any point. We record remotely. Usually when we're in studio, we can kind of eye each other and pass the questions off. So James, if you have anything, just jump in here. I'm very curious defensively because we know WIT teams are always super sound on the defensive end. But I wonder, from your perspective, first of all, who are the standouts? And second of all, which is maybe a little bit more interesting, are there any question marks at defense?
The standouts are pretty obvious. I think at this point, Devin Lloyd has to be at the top of every single list. He's on every single watch list for best linebacker, best defensive player in the country, and deservedly so. The the whispers are already afoot, I think, both amongst the fan base and amongst those surrounding the program, that he will end his career as one of the best linebackers to play at the University of Utah. And it's a credit to him and his hard work. He's a converted safety. It was good of the football team to see that he had a future at the linebacking position. But with those kinds of projections, it's always up to the player to be the one who can really make it happen. And I'm going to, Devin Lloyd is a guy who he eats, lives, breathes, sleeps football. He spent a lot of his summer working with younger kids, which I think in terms of development is so crucial for these guys, because you've seen a lot of reps already for Devin Lloyd. What you really need to learn is how to convert what's going on in your head into words that you can share with others. And I think working with younger kids is a big factor in that, because it helps you really understand what you're doing in the game that you're playing so much more. We hear all the time that, I guess the first example that comes to my head, and I apologize to whoever I'm going to offend with this one, is Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love, right? Where Jordan Love says, Aaron helps me out. He gives me these kinds of things. That's a big part of progress as you grow and develop as a player. And I think that's part of why Devin Lloyd came back, was to really evolve and to grow. And you're going to see that kind of production on the field. I think Mika Tafua is another name that we have to throw out there every time we have a conversation like this. Nephi Sewell. I think what he and Devin have together in a tandem allows both of them to play to their strengths. Nephi's a little more free-flowing. He's a little bit more instinctual. And Devin's just, rugged knowledge of everything that's going on out there. He's, we talk about quarterback of the defense. Like, I want a quarterback, I want a linebacker of the offense this year for Utah, where somebody knows everything as well as Devin does. So there's a few names. I think Kawati Pututau, because Utah's had so many good defensive tackles, we don't talk about him enough. In terms of question marks, there's a question mark in terms of who starts opposite of Mika Tafua at the end position. Right now, it looks like it's Xavier Carlton or Van Fillinger, but don't count out Mickey Sugaturanga on that one. The silent N gets me every time. And then in the defensive backfield, it's the safety position. Who's going to start opposite of Vontae Davis? Cole Bishop, definitely the leader in the clubhouse there. I think Coach Whittingham has hit his name in every single presser that I've seen or heard. So that should tell you something about how good he is as an incoming freshman. Overall question marks for the defense, I think, is just, this is still an inexperienced group. How well does everybody mesh? How well do they replace the guys that did leave? Nate Ritchie, for example, I think is probably the biggest name who left. And how well does this team transition from what was a rocky start in 2020, and how do they start off 2021? I think those are the real questions that I'm asking.
James, go ahead and jump in if you have something.
Yeah, sorry for the lack of congruency, Brian, but I want to circle back to the quarterback discussion. I mean, it's the big one on everyone's mind. It's not the one I talk about most, or I should care about more than I do, in all honesty. But I was wondering, and from scrimmages, do they release stats? Because what is the one thing, if you had to decide when Andy and Coach Witt come down to making the decision who's going to start week 1 in 2 weeks versus Weber State, what would you think? It seems like they're so close, tight. Has there been turnovers in scrimmages? Because all I think about at the bottom line is who has the most turnovers. If it's pretty close, but someone's like 4-1, I think they're probably going to go with the one person. So that's what I'm looking for to try to guess. And I don't know if that's available to you or if you're getting any idea of who's protecting the ball most out of Brewer and Cam Rising.
Yeah, I probably need to get out the bag of cash and find out whoever it is that keeps the stats and have them, slip one under the door or something like that at night. But we don't get a ton of official updates. What I do know is that in the scrimmage on Saturday, Cam Rising was epically precise. And I think that's really what they're looking for in the quarterback. You mentioned turnovers being a big factor. I think that's what gave Charlie Brewer the edge initially. But Cam Rising finished every single drive that he started with a touchdown. And if you remember back in years past, that was an issue for Utah for a long time. I think, Troy Taylor was really the first one who kind of started to unlock the riddle of the red zone a little bit for Utah. I think that Andy Ludwig has continued that and done a really excellent job. And so that's where I look at in terms of functionality of the offense. I think it's twofold. I think it's, like you said, it's about the turnovers. And that if you're going to have a Kyle Whittingham coach team, the defense is going to be strong and the defense is going to try and make turnovers. So your offense has to be reliable with that. Where I think the separation comes is that Utah's got more weapons around the quarterbacks this year, albeit in similar positions, right, with tight ends and running backs. than maybe at the wide receiver position. But even at wide receiver, there are weapons out there, probably more so than any year that I can remember. When we look back at, for example, the Tyler Huntley era and how he started out, I think the reason for going with Tyler Huntley was because there weren't a lot of weapons that can make things happen. That's completely different with this offense. I've stuck with the line that I think Charlie Brewer is the starter for the very reasons that you mentioned, James, that he is the most precise. He's the most accurate. He is the least likely to cause a turnover. I think he's an excellent decision maker. I think he's able to process his information quickly, and that's part of what gives him the advantage. That being said, I think what's really intriguing about Cameron Rising is that he is a game breaker. He is a guy who can make things happen with his arm and his feet. His lack of experience does hurt him a little bit. There's no doubt about that. And so, I think that the coaching staff chooses Charlie Brewer for all those reasons. My personal choice is different. I've been on, team sick boy, as they like to call him, with Cameron Rising, because he is, like he walks around, man, he's got some sand in the pants there. He's a big dude, especially down low. And that's part of the reason why I love him so much, is he can make things happen with his feet. He's extremely athletic. I love his demeanor. Again, we were talking about how Charlie Brewer was going to be the guy no matter what, a little over a month ago. And Cameron Rising has flipped this whole thing on his head because he's gone out and competed. And so I think you've got to love a guy like that who really does bring that kind of attitude and that mindset to the position. So like I said, for me, I would choose Cameron Rising. I do think that Witt is going to favor Charlie Brewer for the experience and for the safekeeping of the football.
It's a bummer that they don't, and I'll let you jump in there, James. Sorry. It's a bummer they don't let people in there to watch, because this would be a fun battle to break down every day at camp. Like, I can just imagine being up there and trying to watch this battle go down. I think that'd be a lot of fun. All right, sorry, James, go ahead.
Well, I wanted to add to that, Brian, if I could. I mean, think of how amazing it is in back-to-back seasons. If you're a coach, right, and you're looking at Cam Rising. I mean, there have been 2 seasons where, granted, he's a transfer, but he's had an upperclassman transfer in who the whole state and probably the whole coaching staff assumed was going to be the starter just based on credentials. And yet we're talking today, 2 weeks out, and last year it played out this way as well, that he's given them all they can handle and maybe a little more than they want as far as the decision process. Talk about a little bit. I'm very interested. Obviously, the running back group is missing a key person from the tragedy last year of Ty Jordan. But with Pledger and Curry and Micah Bernard, I think the running backs are going to play a crucial role offensively, and not just running the ball. I think you're going to see him getting out of the backfield and making some moves, especially Pledger. I'm excited to see him in screen games, or when a play breaks down, him getting, a drop off and making something happen.
Yeah, I mean, I almost don't need to come on the show because James is nailing all the talking points right now. It is true. Like, they've got a 4-headed beast there at running back, and they're going to use them all. What I loved most about Micah Bernard as a prospect coming out of high school was his versatility. When you watch his highlight as a junior, every kick that he touched on kickoff was basically a touchdown or close to it. And he played at a very small school without a lot of talent around him. And so they had to find a lot of ways to get him the football. So he's got versatility. So you can put him in the slot. You can run him on motions. You can do a lot of the similar things that you want to do with Britton Covey to get him the football. And I think he and TJ Pledger both have that ability. We've seen it at Oklahoma that TJ Pledger caught a lot of balls out of the backfield. He has that explosive gear to him, that little bit of extra lean, that little extra twitch, that where he can cause big plays to happen. And really in college football and offenses especially, like, that's such a huge component and such a huge key to it, is having those explosive plays. And so I think you're spot on that the running backs are really going to be a group that, while you're going to see all 4 of them, and I don't know, that anybody out there has not heard of Tavion Thomas yet. If you haven't, he's the JUCO transfer that they picked up from Independence Community College in the summer. He's 6'3", 230. He runs very similarly to Derrick Henry. He's incredibly fluid as an athlete, meaning that he has a lot more bend. So a lot of those guys tend to run upright. He can get low and run behind his pads. So he can run, behind the tackle or behind the offensive line, but he can also run outside the tackles, and that makes him a huge weapon. But you mix in all 4 of those guys, and it's wild that you could turn over almost every single player in that room and get better. but they really have. And I think a lot of that was because they had so much confidence in Mekhi Bernard being there and being able to carry a load. But I think the hard part is going to be, how do you find ways to keep them all involved and invested? But it's outside of just the running game, like you mentioned, when you have a weapon like Brandon Keithy, who also needs to get touches. And so it's one of those good problems, like we like to say. I'm with, Alan, I wish that they would let us watch the dang practices, at least 10 or 15 minutes. I don't need that much. Like, it's not like I'm trying to get a buffet of football practice time up there. Just give me a few minutes, a few morsels. But from what we're hearing, and it's pretty consistent, from a variety of people that have been able to watch and been able to see what's going on, that running back room has really changed, the way the team kind of feels about the offense. And I want to point out the fact that how bizarre is it that it's a Kyle Whittingham coach team, and so much of the positives we heard about the offense. I think it really speaks highly to what the staff has done and what they've been able to do in terms of identifying where their issues are and finding ways to solve those problems while still maintaining their identity.
We're hearing all this stuff about how this team is comparable to 2019. And obviously, as a fan, that gets me super pumped, super excited. But then I do hear, I know the talent's there. I'm very confident that the talent's there. But since there are so many pieces that are coming in that really haven't worked together and we haven't seen them together on the field, how apt is that comparison?
I think it's the most recent, and so that's why everybody's making it. And there's some similarities in terms of guys returning because they want to make things, they want to turn things around with the program and really get that championship. I think you're always going to have parallels from season to season as long as Kyle Whittingham's the head there. Having said that, the makeup of this team and the makeup of 2019 are very different. Tyler Huntley had been there for 4 years as a quarterback. You're basically introducing two brand new guys. And I know Cam Rising has been there for 2 years, but he's taken 16 snaps, so he doesn't have that kind of in-game experience. And you could see nerves a little bit in that game against USC. Like I have a lot of belief in him. That doesn't mean that, guys don't get nervous still. And then the other part of it too, is that I think the advent of the transfer portal cannot be understated because you went out and, you lost to Brian Thompson, the tragedy surrounding Ty Jordan, and then the exodus of Jordan Wilmore and Devin Brumfield. But you went out and replaced all those guys with players who are equal to or better than, and I think Theo Howard is just absolutely exploding onto the scene up there at the University of Utah, which should be music to Utes fans' ears. The conversation is that they haven't seen a wide receiver as polished as Theo probably since Darren Carrington, and that's a good sign. I think the concern with him is always just health. How healthy can he be? How can you manage his nicks and his bruises and everything like that so that he can make it through the full season? But they also have a lot of young guys that they brought in, and so all those factors on top of coming off a season where you only played 5 games because of COVID, like I know that that's the parallel that we want to make, and there are some. But I think every team is different. Every season is different, and this team is going to have a different makeup than that 2019 team. Are there going to be parallels and similarities? Sure. But this team, I think I'm not nervous necessarily, but I'm curious to see how they handle the pressure and the weight of expectations, because with the conversation in the chatter already starting about how this should be a team that should compete for a Pac-12 championship. You do have some guys that were there in 2019 and a lot of carryover in that regard. But you also have a lot of young guys that are going to be starting for their second season only, and their first year was only 5 games. And at that, they probably didn't even meet all of their teammates because they were so, separated because of COVID protocols. I mean, we've heard Morgan Scalley talk about how they couldn't really even teach man-to-man defense last year because they were so concerned about COVID and everything else. Now, thankfully, a lot of that will be mitigated because they've been very diligent about getting everybody on the team vaccinated, making sure that everybody is able and eligible to participate. And I think having a little bit more experience with the protocols and how to split things up, if things get a little bit dicey or if something changes, because I think nowadays you really kind of have to expect, that something's going to happen, right? I think that will be an asset to them, but I'm very curious to see how a lot of these young guys respond. I think that's a big part of it. And so I think in that regards, there are some pretty significant differences. but the expectations are there, and that's what this program wants, and that's really where they need to thrive, is under those kinds of high expectations.
Go ahead, James, if you got something.
It is interesting. You're right. I mean, 2019 does feel like just the natural comparison because it's so recent, and we were good, and we expect to be good this year. But I want to circle back to two things. We got to get to the O-line and defense. And let's start with the defense, and then we'll go to the O-line. We'll finish strong if we have to. The defense was awesome that year and had a lot of turnovers. I sort of worry, especially in the back end with some new fill-ins, but they gave up a ton of big plays. Right? It felt like in 2019, it was feast or famine. Like the defense was sacking or turning over and scoring picks, or they were getting beat over the top or in some big moment. And really my concern for the defense is that it will be similar to that. And hopefully the offense can fill the void as they did in 19, when those games where the defense struggles a little bit, but is getting turnover, but is getting hit on the other side. Do you anticipate that sort of struggle, at least early on, maybe not with Weber State, but the Y is right around the corner?
It's a fascinating question because I think there's so many factors to it, right? Like the inexperience last year, like if you watch Clark Phillips from game to game, oh boy, does he want to forget USC, but oh boy, does he want to remember Washington State. Like, what a good coming out party for him. And you think about it in the course of a, 5 to 6 game season, even though one of those games technically got canceled, for him to make that kind of evolution, I think is very positive, and they love what they're seeing from him. I think JT Broughton was a guy that really showed up strong. But at the same time, you're right. Like it was feast or famine a lot of times in the backfield. And we saw Vontae Davis benefit from that at times. I think it's twofold. I think one is that, you had some young guys that have now seen another year of seasoning. They've had a full spring. I think that's an underrated aspect to it, especially for a guy like Clark Phillips, who now has game experience and could go up against other guys and perfect his craft in the spring. I think the other part of it too is that this is a team that last year ran a lot of zone, and they weren't really comfortable running zone necessarily. I think to counter that, you're going to run a lot more man. And so that's going to allow you to do a lot more of your blitzing, which I think Utah's always liked. The other part of it too is I think Mika Tafua really evolved towards the end of last season. And that's a big difference maker, because if he can put pressure on the quarterback, if you can find 2 guys or 3 guys or however many else across from him, or maybe even a guy up the middle, like a Tennessee Pututau who can come in on third downs, or a Devin Kafusi who can be a versatile piece, and I've talked about this a lot. I think having backups to Devin Lloyd is so huge, because you've got both the Calvert brothers who are excellent linebackers who can flow sideline to sideline. And you can use Devin Lloyd as more of a stand-up rushing piece to be a threat in the pass, pass rush game. And that makes a big difference for this defense, because if you're putting pressure on quarterbacks, you're not as likely to give up those big play scenarios. So all this is contingent upon a couple different things, right? Are these young guys going to step up to the plate? Does the progress that Mika Tafua made at the end of the season carry over? Do they really find a legitimate backup that will allow Devin Lloyd to be a versatile piece to move around the field? These are questions I don't have the answers to, and that's a good thing, because that's where you want to be going into a season. Is you want to have, storylines that you're watching the games for. I know that everybody loves to watch it for wins and losses. We're all the same. We love to win, and wins are always better than losses, but there are also those nuances that you want to see how things develop. And so, I think it's a really fascinating question to talk about, because there are so many factors that really go into what was going on last year, what's gone on in years previous. And, there's always that one terrible word that hovers over all of this, and that's injuries. If they can survive and overcome injuries, because they're going to happen no matter what, then I think it gives Utah a really good chance to be successful. And we'll see a more limiting defense in terms of not giving up so many big plays, and hopefully one that can still churn out a lot of turnovers.
Yeah, when we had Phil Steele on 2 weeks ago, he talked about how offensive lines all over the country are just returning everybody. And at the U, there's no exception there. So we're kind of familiar with it, but what can we expect from that O-line?
I think the biggest thing you can expect is for Nick Thor to have another major impact on the interior. Moving to center has been a big thing for him. I think he's really grasped it fully. In fact, I think he really that was a big contingency of him returning to Utah for his super senior year, I guess we can call it. he wanted to be in the interior there. He wanted to play center. He likes the responsibility that comes with having to know all the positions, with being able to counsel and teach other guys along that offensive line. We saw a very positive impact from, Satala Lomea, who is a young guy who needs that kind of knowledge that Nick provides and that communication. And I think that's another big part of it too. There's so many interesting factors comparing last year to this year. They're going to have to deal with crowds again and crowd noise. And that wasn't something that they had to do a ton last year. And so this offensive line returns a lot of experience, a lot of starting experience. There are some guys out there that really have an opportunity to excel and establish themselves. I think Laumea is a name that we need to point out a lot because I think he's going to really impress people. We're still waiting to find out who's going to be the guard opposite of him, but it's two guys with experience with Keaton Bills and Braden Daniels. And what I really like about Braden Daniels is that he has some versatility. He took snaps in the spring game at center. He's taken snaps at tackle before. So if you lose another body there, then he can move around a little bit, and having Keaton Bills with some experience is good. Now, what remains to be seen is can you improve on what was mediocre last year, right? Like Utah's always been good in the running game. I think they're pretty proficient in that. And we've seen that teams have always tried to attack it. And while it hasn't always looked pretty, it's been productive still. Now it's up to this group to really kind of put the finishing touches on developing both in the pass protection, but also in making sure that this offense is consistent and moves with regularity. I think slow starts are a big issue. They've got to be the line setters, so to speak, with all of that. And some of it will come down with getting positions set, finding out who the tackles are going to be. We've heard a lot about Bama ascending in the offseason. We know that Simi Moala is a reliable starter there. Jaron Kump came onto his own. When does he come back into the fold? He's dealing with an injury that we really haven't heard anything about, but he's posted pictures on social media wearing a boot, so there's something to it, right? So we're looking for information off of all of that, and they need to settle that in. But I think really where this group can excel is keeping Nick Ford at that center position and having his influence be kind of across the board on everybody.
Man, that's so much information. You're just spitting this off the top of your head too. Like that's what's great. Like you don't have notes in front of you. You're just like going, man. That's why I say that this team as good or better than any media personality in this market. So we appreciate what you're doing. Real quick, I wanted to mention, I thought that the tribute that you gave to John Pease on Locked On Utes was really, really heartfelt. And actually, it made me tear up a little bit, man. So I thank you for doing that. We'd be remiss if we didn't mention the loss of John Pease and what he meant to this program. And I wondered if you just take a second, maybe tell the listeners and viewers what he meant to you and what he meant to the program in general.
Well, I think that was the impact that he had on the program and everyone, is everyone felt like, he was somebody that they could interact with. I remember bumping into him one day at a Costco and it was always, it was always hit or miss if he would recognize you. And some of that was just because I would see him in so many different places. I saw him at a coaching clinic once, I saw him in media, and I bumped into him at Costco, say, "Hey coach, how are you doing?" And he would, the second that, it would click in, he'd just light up. And it was, he was so willing to give of his time and his energy and his education, because he really was a PhD in football. But, it's fascinating because there are not a lot of people that, you share throughout generations in your life. But the fact that he was a GA when my dad played at the U, the fact that I had an opportunity to see him as a coach, when I was starting out a little bit in coaching, and then, the impact that he's had on the coaching staff up there. It was just, he's one of those people that you wanted to know and you wanted to get to know better and you wanted to spend time with every single time that you could, because he really did bring passion to everything that he was doing. And I thought Hans Olsen shared a lot of great stories about golfing with him. And now I'm sitting here wishing, man, like I wish I would have gotten out to golf with him at some point in time, because I can only imagine, what a cut up he would have been then. But he was willing. And I think these days it's really hard to find people that are so openly willing. And I think some of it was because he was so fearless with who he was, with what he knew, and with who he had become throughout his life, that there just wasn't any hesitation to help others. And so those are the kinds of things that when I think about him and the impact that he's had on the fan base, he never hesitated about making mistakes. He knew he was going to make them. He knew it wasn't perfect and it didn't matter. And that completely overshadowed any mistake that may or may not have popped up, during his life and his career. And I think that kind of willingness to bond with others, to help them out, to give of your time, to give of yourself so freely, it's such an embodiment of what I think Utah wants to build and what they want to project. And it's hard as an outside observer to stay biased sometimes, because you hear these kids talk constantly about family and about the influence of the program and the culture up there, especially, like the Jaquindon Jacksons of the world who come from Texas, and it's just not the same there. They come here and it's an eye opener. And I think a big reason that the defense is what it is because of John Peace.
That clip of him dancing on the field is like one of the more heartwarming things. Every time I see it, and I see it in GIF form or the video, it just warms my heart. It makes me laugh. It's great.
Yeah, legendary. I can't even dance that well right now,
right.
And he's doing it in his 70s.
Right, exactly. Before we let you go, I was wondering, and I don't know if you've given your official prediction yet, but how many games do you see this team winning this year?
I don't even know that I have an official prediction. I'm terrible with predictions. I'm terrible about rankings. All the things that I think make me good at being an observer make me terrible with that kind of thing. That being said, I think 10-2 is the mark. I think the out of conference schedule is I don't want to say easy, but there are 3 winnable games there. And then the conference schedule sets up nicely to where, if they win at key points, they can afford to drop 1 or 2 games. I think the biggest thing is going to be that they have to win that game in LA. I think you have to show well against Oregon in November up at Rice Eccles. And if you can do that, then that gives you a lot of leeway. I think 10-2 is a safe prediction because that gets the expectations where they need to be, right? This is not going to be a season where you're going to go undefeated in the Pac-12. And if somebody does, either something has gone terribly, terribly wrong, or somebody really has just emerged above and beyond what we all expected, because I've called this the Mad Max Fury Road season of the Pac-12 with the amount of chaos there is. There's a lot of good teams in the South, and we're starting to hear more and more about teams in the North. And so who's other than, and I hate to rag on Arizona here, but who's the doormat? There really isn't one. Colorado lost the quarterback to injury, so that may complicate things with them a little bit. But, you're going to have returning starters. And I think this year, especially because of COVID, so many teams have returning experience, and that could really benefit and favor the Pac-12 for once, because you look at it, and this conference has been really proficient at churning out high-end, talent, especially at the skill positions as juniors. And so some of that coming back could really help them. And I think, I think 10-2 is where I'll kind of stake my claim, but this team has everything that it needs to win a conference championship. You got to catch some breaks with injuries and just simply with balls bouncing your way in games. But given that, I think it's 10-2, and I really do believe that this could be the year that they make that breakthrough and win the Pac-12 championship. Now, I don't know. I don't know that I want to predict that fully, just because there is so much unknown still. But I don't see a team in the conference that I look at and think no, just Utah's no chance, right? And so I think given that kind of scenario, that Utah has as good a chance as anybody. So I don't know what the odds are anymore over at Bet Online or whatever service you guys like to pull your odds from, but you got a couple bucks laying around, why not, right?
Might as well. Seriously, I mean, it is kind of a weird year. Usually there is that team where you're like, oh, USC, man, that's going to be tough, or Oregon, that's going to be tough, and they're going to be good, but it's just not that juggernaut that it seems like it has been in the past. That feels like it's wide open, like you said. James, anything you have before we let Bryan go?
Next time you're on, I want to discuss how important it is, and we had to go with John Pease there because John Pease is the man, but how important it is that Nick Ford was willing to go to the anchor position of being a center. I know we talk a lot about left tackle, protecting the blind side. But the man in the middle really pulls the trigger come game day and makes sure it all stays together. I agree with you. I'm so excited to watch how that develops.
It's something I could talk about for hours, and I don't think anybody else wants to listen to me talk about it for hours. But we'll definitely have to revisit this and maybe put together a little crossover with Locked On Utes as well, because I'd love to have you guys on as well and talk about it too. I'm terrible at planning ahead, and so as long as I can get something on the books, with people who are understanding with how schedules are, then I can usually get somebody to come on with me. But it's been really fun talking to you guys about it today, and I know I've taken way more time than I deserved, but like I said, I could talk offensive line, I could talk the big uglies up front all day every day, and just football in general, not just Utah football, is something I love and I'm passionate about, and it's an easy thing for me to talk about. So thank you so much for having me on, guys. I appreciate it.
Well, Bryan, honestly, we could sit here and we could just do this for hours. Like, there's no, if we didn't have responsibilities and other garbage going on, seriously, like, it's so much fun talking to you and picking your brain. I know you're a super busy guy, so I don't want to put any more pressure on you. But is the Blockcast ever coming back? It's not like you have enough on your plate with all these other podcasts you do and your job and covering the Utes, but that was always a favorite of mine. I know it was a fan favorite too. So
yeah, it's a favorite of mine too. I think Steve Bartle and Cameron Beck are two of the best people in the world to talk football with, and we were able to put together an episode for Locked On Utes when Jake was out on vacation. So I think if we can do that, then we can probably scrape something together for the season. So one way or another, the Blockcast will return. It just sometimes it just depends on how much sleep we've gotten and how much mental health we have left to give.
Well, like I said, you are a busy man. It's very understandable. Not to put more pressure on you, but I really love that show. So
yeah. Busy is as busy does, man. If I wasn't busy, then all I'd be doing is wasting somebody else's time. So, at least doing this kind of stuff, I feel like I have a positive impact. And like you said, this is the kind of stuff that I can talk about all day. And it's just, that's the beauty about sports is that it does allow us to have fun conversations, even when it does get a little gnarly on Twitter, and just, build relationships. So.
Well, thank you for joining us. Brown Bear SLC on Twitter. Definitely give him a follow. One of the better follows you will ever have on Twitter. Also, you want to just another rundown of the podcast you're doing right now real quick?
Yeah, Locked On Utes. We're the daily Utah podcast. I think that's part of the reason why I don't have to have notes. I've said all these names a million times already. So it's, and if anybody's out there trying to get into podcasting, let me tell you, try to put together a daily podcast. You'll really grow and improve. It's a great way to do it. But Locked On Utes, and then you can always find my musings and my writings over at utezone.com. I try to produce at least one thoughtful piece every now and then. Sometimes I hit, sometimes I miss, but that's how it goes in this industry.
Well, Bryan Brown, thank you for taking the time. You've been very generous with your time. And we'll do it more often. We'll get you on maybe mid-season or a couple weeks in or something like that and do it again.
Would love it. You guys are a blast to talk to. I love the podcast. I'm a subscriber across multiple platforms. So that's how you really know you're invested, right? When you have to hit the Google and the
Yes,
Apple
and
and the Spotify and everybody.
Yeah, man, that Salt Lake Stallions logo is super awesome. Anyone who's watching on K-Patter TV or on YouTube, youtube.com/DDonsports, could see that shirt he was wearing. It was a good logo. It was a good team. It had a lot of local guys on there. Such a bummer.
It is.
Such a bummer. But yeah, Bryan's just dropping knowledge, dude, like left and right. I kind of wish you guys would have been able to get more into the Nick Ford thing, because I think that would have been a lot of fun to hear you guys geek out about offensive line talk. And Bryan mentioned that he doesn't think many people would like to hear it. I would love to hear it. There's something weird. Like, I used to listen to Hans Olsen do this all the time back in the day. No, it wasn't Hans Olsen. It was Kyle Gunther. Used to talk O-line, like almost exclusively, because that was kind of all he really knew. And I thought, like, I loved it. I loved just the nuances, because that's where the play starts and ends on the O-line. And so I love hearing the geeks who can really geek out about that.
Yeah, I mean, me too. And we got it. I mean, like, I remember we went up to camp, and I want to say his name. It was Mike Tice, but it wasn't. He went to Florida. Do you remember the big offensive line coach? This is back in like 09, 010.
We interviewed him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't remember his name right now, which is killing me, and it's terribly unfortunate, and I apologize. But he was my favorite person to go talk to.
Dude, yeah, because he was so amped, like the energy level that he would give off. And of course, he's a huge guy. I'm a short little guy, so standing next to him, I felt just terrified. But the energy level he would bring was enviable because he was so
full no
pumped.
punches group.
Yes, exactly.
Right? Like, that's why I love watching it. I love talking about it. Like, we know, right? Like, a quarterback, sometimes his stats can be somewhat misleading. Not necessarily, but they can be.
Right.
Drops happen, whatever. But I mean, offensive line, they're willing to bring it, and he's willing to talk as if he's playing tomorrow.
Right.
He was my favorite, and I can't believe I've forgotten his name. Nonetheless, yeah, we'll get back to that. I think he hit on some important points for Utah fans to consider, right? And we were doing the comparison from 2019 to this team, but there are a lot more moving parts. Sir, some of them are super seniors and come back. That's kind of the expectation level fans and the coaching staff, or maybe the media and a little bit of the coaching staff have set, in my estimation, when the way they talk about it. But again, Cam's barely played any, and Charlie Brewer's never put on a Ute helmet on a game day, on a literal game day.
Right.
So it's right back to 2020, wondering what will occur and what we'll see. The talent's there, but can they piece it together?
Yeah, I'm excited. Like, I'm super excited for this year. I'm trying, because I have a hard time turning off my fandom, obviously. I'm trying not to let the hype get to me too much, because I've been a Utah fan my whole life, and I know how this goes. I've been a Jazz fan my whole life. I know how this goes. I get excited. I get let down. So I'm trying really hard to just temper my expectations a little bit. And, but when I keep hearing everyone say, yeah, 2019, man, this could be a very similar result. And then I hear Bryan, who is a student of the game and very knowledgeable about this team, when he says 10-2, I'm excited. So I don't know, man. We're not doing it this week, but I think next week, we're going to have to go through and actually make our prediction. We put it off the last 2 weeks because it's just too, I don't know, man. I look at this, and like he said, this is kind of like Mad Max Fury Road in the Pac-12. This is the Wild West. You never know what's going to happen. So I'm having a hard time looking at these and breaking these teams down and coming up with a definitive prediction.
You're right. And he was right. I mean, that is a good way to look at it, right? Any week. And he talked about Colorado losing quarterback to injury, but UCLA seems to be coming up. ASU is legit. Arizona, I mean, first-year coach, not too good the last few years. That may be the only one team that, I don't know. But he's right. Any week, and we've seen it in weeks past, or in years past, a lower team that hasn't won a lot of games can come up and bite you. And that's north, south, west.
Yep.
I think the Pac-12 from top to bottom, I mean, it's one of the better conferences. It's just whether or not we can get an elite team out there to show out for them.
Yep, exactly. Okay, we're running short on time, and of course, we got to get to our boy, Nate the Hemorrhoid, coming through strong again on the voicemail and text line. That's 801-477-7678 or 801-47-SPORT. Nate is keeping this voicemail and text line alive, so let's get into this. If I can pull it up. Here we go.
Hey, boys. So as you know, I took a break from sports in 2020. And then, of course, I started annoying you again with my opinion about sports in 2021. So as you also know, I do work in healthcare, and what you said is totally true. We're all getting burned out, and it's getting overcrowded again. And, of course, due to recent trends, I'm rearranging my activities. But one thing is for sure, I'm going to stay in unless it's an experience I probably can't have again. So it could be a concert or a certain game, but the thing I'll be doing the most is, for certain, wearing my freaking mask. But to talk about sports now, I'm high on the Utes. I know that's shocking, but I have them going 11-1, and the only loss being to USC because, honestly, until they can beat USC in LA, I just can't pick them.
Very good point, and I'm glad you brought that up because I feel the same way.
So I am a realist, and I'm hoping for the 11-1, obviously. But if they go 10-2, I won't be shocked, won't be disappointed, and I am hoping to avoid that hiccup game that they once used to have a problem with. 9-3 would be a sad story, but that's, of course, if typical injuries were to occur to college athletes. But I'll stand by my 11-1 prediction. And because I enjoy trolling the Zoobs, I agree with Dog. 6-6 would be a great season for BYU. I could also see a 7-5 because Kalani seems to get more out of his players like Kyle used to back in the day, even though BYU's is against inferior competition. So I predict that they'll lose to the teams they should, but they'll have that one surprise win like they always do.
So real quick, and then we'll finish with his voicemail. What do you think about that? Because I'm not even trying to troll. I really believe 6-6 is entirely within the realm of possibility for BYU.
Yeah, I think 6-6 is reasonable. I mean, look, I think, and I said it last time, and we'll get on it next week. It's important that Kalani backs up an 11-1 with a good year. I mean, 6-6 is reasonable, but I think he's shooting for more.
I think so too. Let's see. Yep.
And regarding the music, you're both right. The Beatles are the most overrated, almost more overrated than Danzig and the Ramones combined.
God.
So here's my top 10, just based on longevity, fan base, and popularity within their genre. It goes Metallica, Green Day, Whitney Houston, the Eagles, Pearl Jam, Backstreet Boys, Taylor Swift, Michael Jackson, Garth Brooks, and Eminem at the number 1 spot. So love always, stay safe, and don't tread on red.
Touche.
Nice,
Thank
nice.
you, my friend. Yeah, don't tread on the reds. Leave those alone.
Referencing your hat and our discussion last week. So he has Metallica in there at number 10.
Yeah. He also has Eminem as number 1.
I don't
Tough.
like. I don't. This is a. The more I've thought about this, because I did try to put together a little list, and what we're talking about is last week we had a discussion about top 10. What was it? Top 10 best bands
of all time. Yeah,
bands of all time.
Best 10 bands of all time.
Not
top
necessarily bands we're fans of. Not necessarily bands that we listen to a lot or have a lot of records, but just the best bands of all time. I can't make this list because I can't get out of my own head. I can tell you my favorite. I can tell you popular, but
we're getting into that territory. What was the debate we had about where I had to go about setting criterias? Oh, blowouts.
Yeah,
this is very similar to the blowout debate.
You mean that blowout debate that went on for like 5 months on this show, and everyone that got more engagement on this show than any other topic in 11 years that we've been doing this. That stupid topic would not die, and more people chimed in on that than anything else we've discussed.
You're welcome. I mean, but that's like, again, first of all, we didn't set out, we don't have a good enough criteria.
That's true.
The first part.
That's the problem. If there's a criteria, I could do it, but that's the problem.
I just assume everyone has the same line of thought about criteria. It's not who I like. It's about what they've accomplished and sort of the roads they've made. You know, I mean, like, I think without a doubt, I respect the Beatles. I like 10 of their songs, but they don't intrigue me, and they're number 1 without a doubt. Because,
I agree.
You know,
I agree.
So I can't, but they're not my cup of tea. Like, I don't put in a Beatles album and ever jam it. Like, not literally ever.
I mean,
which is unfortunate.
I don't even listen. I don't even hear a Beatles song and be like, oh, that's kind of good. It's like,
what? What does that say about us? This goes back to the no shoes. Like, we just don't like to have fun.
I think that's what it is, man. I think that's because there's just no one out there who would agree with us other than Nate the Hemorrhoid. Wait, hold on. All 3 of us are on the same page on this one.
Yeah.
When has that ever happened?
I actually love the Beatles secretly.
Yeah, probably. Now, see, you got to change it. Be a little contrarian, I see. I haven't heard our boy Doug on Twitter. He said that he would have to do 2 different lists, like influential and then favorite. And that's kind of where I'm at. Like, it's too hard for me. If we got to come up with some criteria for that. So, but Doug is he's a huge music guy, and that's why one of the many reasons I get along with him so well is because we're kind of on the same wavelength with that stuff. He has far more eclectic taste and more refined taste than me. Like, mine's just I'm one genre, one decade type of person, and he's way better at that stuff. So his opinion, I'm actually very interested to hear what he has to say about this. So I want to hear everyone's list though. Doesn't matter if you like music, not huge music fan or not. Let's hear your lists. Who do you think are the best bands of all time?
10 best.
10 best. And you could narrow it to 5 if you want.
For sure.
I think the Beatles have to be number 1, though, as much as it pains me to say it.
I agree.
God, it sucks. I just don't understand this world. I don't think I was meant for this world.
Easy, buddy.
I think I was meant to be born on some planet in a faraway galaxy. All right. Well, I agree with him about the COVID issues right now. And we have 1 minute left, so we don't have time to delve into it. We've kind of hit this pretty hard. I don't think I'm going to go to the games for a while. There's no hospital beds left. COVID is spiking. It's very scary, especially for the kids right now. I have concert tickets. I don't think I'm going to go to them. I haven't decided definitively, but I'm leaning that way because it's just very scary right now.
Yeah, I mean, you hit it. It's nerve-wracking. It's hard to know what's right and what's wrong. One thing you definitively know is right is if you don't have to go, and if you feel uncomfortable, stay home. I do hope, though, from a pure football perspective, right? I was thinking about this, and I almost asked Bryan, and maybe I should have. With the way that, the forfeits are going via Pac-12, I hope there's a communication between Jay Hill, Kalani Sitake, and whoever our other third, I can't even remember right now, our third matchup is in the preseason, quote unquote, before we get into conference schedule.
San Diego State.
Thank you, San Diego State. I hope that they're vaccinated. Can you imagine? And this is a crazy thing. You play BYU and you're out for 2 weeks if their vaccination rate's low. They haven't released it. They say they're somewhere around 40 or 50. It presents a unique problem you could be even more angry. And I'm hoping the relationship that Kalani and Witt have developed at least gives him some insight to how difficult that may be to overcome. It's there.
I agree.
It's going to be a factor, just hopefully not as big a factor as last year.
It will. It's going to be a problem. It's going to be a problem throughout college football. So hopefully the Utes don't have to forfeit any. Hopefully none of the local teams have to forfeit any games. But I'm not holding out hope. Let's put it that way. Okay, that's going to do it for episode 378 of Dog and Deuce. Thanks again to Bryan Brown for stopping by and just dropping all that knowledge. We will definitely get him back. I know he's massively popular on Twitter and his podcasts are massively popular. So we definitely like to ride the coattails of people who are better at this than us. So we'll get him back on. No, but seriously, we have a lot of fun with him. We'll be back next week. We're going to be previewing BYU season, hopefully next week. And then we'll be talking some Aggies the following week. And we'll make our predictions at some point too. So come back for that. In the meantime, we want to hear what you have to say. Send us an email to doganddeuce@gmail.com. I'm Dog.
And I'm Deuce.
And we will talk to you next week.
Thanks for making us a part of your day.